you can be saved without, I started to say castration, not castration. What's the fucking word?
Circumcision.
Circumcision. There you go. That's a very different thing.
Woo! I don't think many people would be signing up for
great.
Christianity if castration
Right.
was a part of the deal.
We thought foot washing was a deal breaker. Welcome to Flan Again, a Mike Flanagan rewatch, brought to you by the Articulate Coven. For more information on the original Anne Rice fan podcast and community, visit articulatecoven.com and find more about this show at articulatecoven.com/flanagain. Welcome to Flan Again, a Mike Flanagan rewatch podcast from the Articulate Coven. We are your hosts. I'm Joel.
I'm Ashley.
And we are the Articulate Coven. Ashley, man, this show is so darn good, and it just keeps getting better.
This episode in particular, which features the worst boat ride in history, is a bit of a doozy. It's a bit of a doozy.
Okay, I have one piece of follow-up before we get into the episode proper,
Awesome.
but then all of the rest of them fit in the episode itself, so that's how we're going to go about it today. All right, Mandy Taylor, one of our patrons. Thank you, Mandy.
Hey, Mandy.
Mandy says about episode 4, fabulous conversation as always. A couple of music-related notes. We Gather Together is still sung in some Catholic churches, not just Flanagan having fun, but he might have been doing that too. We talked about how We Gather Together is a Protestant protest song. And so
Right.
the idea that it was used in a Catholic ceremony was kind of strange to me, but apparently that's absolutely possible. So, and is used sometimes. So thank you for that. Mandy also says, I'm definitely one who cries because of music, and very specifically at a gathering of voices and harmonies. I miss being in choir so much and have thought about trying to seek that out as an adult, but I fear I'd just cry through every performance now.
For real.
If you've never seen this video on YouTube, I can't recommend it enough. And since it's called Heavenly Father, it's slightly related. And she gave us a great link. I'm going to put that link in the show notes for you to check out. And I'm not going to give you any more than that. Just go and watch it. It's very, very cool. She says, thank you for the sermon from the soapbox, Joel and Ashley. We talked quite a bit about reproductive rights in last episode. And I think it's going to come up at least once in this one too. But like genuinely, we meant what we say, and it is a dangerous time for women. And so like, we don't want it to be political, but when you make our lives and our existence
be political.
Yeah, it shouldn't be, but you guys made it so we're gonna talk about it sometimes. Okay, Brat Prince Bran, a new patron, by the way. Thanks, Bran. As a recovering alcoholic, the religious aspects of the program have always been difficult for me. Although it is understood that all religions are welcome, that your God may not be my God, etc., if there even is a God, there is still a heavily Christian aspect that ultimately led me to find other avenues to stay sober. We talked about that, I think, in the last episode when we talked about Serenity. It was founded by Christians, and it's very, very heavily influenced by Christian theology. You're right. I'm sure every meeting is different, and I'm not trying to diminish the comfort others seek in a higher power. It just wasn't a tool that helped me. I found it hard to reconcile my own accountability with the notion that someone up there is controlling everything. And man, that he puts it so succinctly there.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Right? Like, it is a problem when you, if part of your ethos, part of your morality is based on a higher power, how do you keep yourself from only doing good things so that you can get a reward in the end, right? We don't treat others well for the cookie, right? That's not what it's for.
I mean, that's one of my intrinsic beefs with it, with religion, it's
a fair beef.
You could just be a good moral person without having to threaten me with hell, I don't need that. I actually can just be a good person on my own just because I'm not a dickhead.
Man, that specific argument or debate there comes to a head in this episode for sure.
Oh Lord, man. Yeah. Ooh.
Bran says, with that said, the sense of community is absolutely essential in recovery. Solitude is the quickest way to relapse. I really felt Riley's worry and disappointment with Joe's absence. You become completely vulnerable sharing yourself in these meetings. You constantly open your wounds to clean it out, exposing the trauma and muck that led you there. And then one day, familiar faces are gone and you're left to wonder. It's a unique experience for sure. I think the way that Flanagan has handled it is so authentic, and your discussions really give me other perspectives to chew on. Love the content as always. Thank you, Brat Prince Bran. Appreciate that, man.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Hell yeah.
So I love the way that this episode starts. Riley doesn't make it home.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
2 nights in a row. One
but
night
he also
was
doesn't make
strange.
it where he's supposed to be either. You know,
but
like,
we don't know that yet. We don't know that yet. I'd love. There's a moment at breakfast. There's a moment at breakfast where Papa Flan hears the gossip from Mama and brother about the fact that Riley's probably been sleeping with or staying over at Aaron. And there's a smirk under that mustache. There's a little glint in his eye. He's still mad at Riley because Riley didn't tell him where he was, and he still feels exposed. And he and Riley are not okay. But there is a little bit of pride too. Aaron's a good one, actually. That would be a good catch. You know, like you can see it.
You could do a lot worse for yourself.
Yeah. His name is Bill. Bull's mother in the sheriff's office is one of the second things that we see here. This episode, by the way, is so crazy to me, Ashley, because they fit so much into the little first section, the first act. Yeah. And then basically the whole episode is really about a flashback. But there's so much happens in town before we get to Riley's story.
Right.
It's fascinating.
And you're dealing it in this town, like this town of however many people. It's population nothing. You got 2 fucking missing people on your island. Like,
so I think we saw a sign in the. I think it's like 127 or something.
Yeah,
I think they say at some point it's tiny. It's also more than 100, but not many.
It's more than 100, but then also I think about like how many people are in that church, and that's not even close to 100 people. So it's not everybody in town is not up in this church, which is very interesting to me. You know, like, but to like have 120 people and you got 2 fucking missing people that no one's seen, like that's.
But and you're it's well pointed that the town is not all in church, and yet. Everybody that matters in the town is in the church.
Is in church. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
If you want to matter in town,
if you want to matter in town, 100%. But it's also like one of those things that in that small town there's still like everybody isn't doing the same thing, even in a teeny tiny town, you know, and there's still people to have differences with and beefs with. But it's really interesting to me that like our main beef, like Bev having a beef with the sheriff for him not being, you know, Christian is like that's what you're going to focus on is the one brown guy in town instead of like the other like 60 people that live in town that are not interested in your God at all. Well,
but she's already marginalized all of them. Right?
Yeah.
Like Bev and the others in town. Bill's mother says it here. You know, Bill's mother says it here. You know, and she calls out, and she's pointing this anger at the wrong place, by the way. And the sheriff's point is, I'm not a Christian. She goes, you know what I mean? But, you know, she says, if y'all don't line up for my son, then I don't know why the hell you're all going to church and calling yourselves Christians. Like, what are you doing on Sundays if you're not going to show up for everybody in town? When something like this happens, we're all supposed to be the same. Yep. And it's clearly the case that we're not all the same. Nobody is missing Bowl except for Bill's mother.
Yeah, no one's missing him, and no one's missing Joe Cawley except for Riley.
Exactly. Okay, next thing we find is there will be no more morning masses. Sturge chanting the sign.
Yeah.
All evening masses moving forward, at least for now, he says.
I wonder why that's a need.
It's such a, I mean, and we do see a reaction to it here, although it immediately gets undercut because Mildred Gunning has shown up and everybody worries about her. But we do see the town is all a little confused by this and askance at it. They're looking. Interesting feedback here, though, and this came on one of our shorts from Matt C 1664 on YouTube. 444. This was on our short about the fours for A's on the church sign. He says 444 equals angels are watching over you. And that was the whole comment. I was like, what's that about? So I Googled it. 444 is an angel number, just as like 666 is the devil number theoretically, and it is supposed to be like a sort of, you could carve it on a door, or like you find it on jewelry and things. Yes, the idea is that it's a little prayer, and that your guardian angels are watching over you. So the 4s in the sign has even a further meaning than we thought it did. Thank you for that.
I don't know how to tell you that ain't no angel. I don't know how many different ways I have to explain to these people that's a fucking vampire loose in your town.
Well, and we see things. There's a lot of missing folks all of a sudden in this town. Ashley, as you mentioned, Miss Flynn, Aaron goes to see Mama Flynn and see if Riley just stayed home that night.
Yeah,
the very opening of this scene, though, I wanted to point out, because Mama Flynn opens the door, sees Aaron, and immediately says, "Aaron, Riley told me.
Yeah.
You are not alone," she says. Implication there being, I think Mama Flynn's had a miscarriage before, right?
Right. Well, and also that, you don't have to pretend this didn't happen, which is a really fucking nice thing for someone going through that, because it is something that you feel like you can't talk to anybody about, Ugh. Yeah. I love Mama Flynn's good folks.
Well, and we see when their information doesn't add up. Riley did come home for dinner and then leave to go to Aaron's and didn't.
Right.
Aaron immediately gets on the case. She goes to see Dad and brother on the boat and see what's up with them and if they have any information about Riley. And then she goes immediately to the sheriff's office. And she knows it's too soon, and she tells him.
She's like, I know this is crazy, but it's not normal and it's off. And I gotta say, that's something that we've got to all do better with. If our gut is telling us something is wrong, something is off, that is your fucking instincts trying to keep you safe. That is your body. That is your, what exists in us from our, hunter-gatherer days. There's something big and dangerous around the corner. That's why you feel weird in your stomach,
Yes.
And we have to listen to that. When we have those feelings, we have to honor them, because that is our body, our soul, our whatever telling us, oh shit, something's really, really off here. And this isn't like Riley. And Riley, she knows that Riley wasn't in a place where he would have fallen off the wagon that hard and left town. That's not.
No.
And she knows he didn't leave town because he wasn't on the ferry. She checked the ferry manifests.
She's crossed her I's and dotted her T's. And there's nowhere that there's really nowhere on the island for him to fall into a drunken stupor without being noticed, is her point. Well,
and someone would have noticed him getting alcohol. Because
exactly.
There's not any store. There's one fucking store, and I'm pretty sure the sheriff is next door to the store. So
he's in the store. He's in his office is in the. He's standing there when Joe Collie is slobbering at the cooler trying not to buy anything. Well, and it's interesting too that you bring up specifically the idea of conscience and trusting your gut, because Father Paul uses that in his homily later, that this is our conscience is here and my conscience is mine, and it's blah, blah, blah. There are many like it, but this is mine, whatever.
God.
He's using it in the wrong way, but it is interesting. We talked about this in last week's episode, where Riley is given the challenge to question Father Paul from Father Paul. Father Paul makes a big deal about serenity. Accept the things you can't change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Right.
And that's what Riley was doing. He's like, this is something I could change, actually. I need to know why Father Paul's lying. I'm going to go put a fine point on it. And so that's what led us here. But again, it's like there's a part of Father Paul, Monsignor, there's a part of Monsignor Pruitt that is rebelling against his own message, or putting the seeds of his own defeat out there. I don't know. Maybe that's not meant to be. Maybe that's not something Flanagan was thinking about. But it did occur to me that here again, he's telling the audience one thing, and yet in his message is the message that they need to hear, which is listen to what I'm saying.
Right. Listen to what I'm saying, not what I'm doing.
Yeah.
The hubris is just thick.
Oh, man.
It's just so unbelievable. The fucking audacity of this guy. I find him Father Paul, Monsignor Pruitt, I find him more and more unlikable with this watch than I've ever found him before. Like, because I feel
culpable is the thing that I keep thinking. He's culpable.
Yes, that is 100% it.
This didn't happen to him.
No, I mean, you made this happen to. You're making this happen to other people. Like, that is, yeah. I think I have way less sympathy for him than I have had before through this watch, and I think it's just because I'm analyzing it more. Also, there's a guy that works at my job who sounds like Hamish Linklater. And I never see him because he comes over and he talks to the woman in the cube next door to me, so I hear him speaking, and it took me like days to figure out, just because we've been watching this, it's so fresh. I was finally like, holy shit, it's Father Paul over there being a
priest.
And now I'm just like, every time he's talking over there, I have to put my headphones in because I'm like, what sort of fucking ruinous shit is happening in the cube next door?
We sort of skipped past it here, but when Aaron and the sheriff were together, there's a great line from Flanagan here, or his team, I should say. Aaron says, "It's probably nothing," and the sheriff immediately, "Most things are." And boy, isn't that true? Like, that's true.
Right.
Go ahead and let's talk about it, though. It's probably nothing. Most things are. First of all, that's good. Just as Ashley said earlier, you got to trust your gut. You also need to know that we're all hypochondriacs at heart, right? Like we all like to spiral into doom thinking. So you take a set of circumstances, hear what your heart and your gut say about it, and then you weigh it, right? Is this something or is this nothing? It's the combination of emotion and logic, and you got to use them both together.
Whoa,
or you're going to end up with a vampire island.
You're going to end up with a fucking vampire in a trunk at your house.
Okay.
It's not a good Thursday.
We talked in the beginning, I think in the second episode, we talked about the two fantastic homilies that Father Paul gives when he first shows up on the island.
Yeah.
And how much we're in love with him at the end of episode 2. And then we said there's one coming towards the end that's going to change your whole opinion of Father Paul. This is it. This homily is very different than what has been present in the pulpit so far.
Yeah.
And you have to think, what changed for Father Paul between here and there? And what changed is,
he's a fucking vampire now.
He's a full-on vampire now, right? He had been experiencing a miracle before. He died and has now eaten Joe Colley's brain, basically, as well as Riley's by this point, we realize later, right? He's also eaten a bunch of Riley. And so it's a different man in the pulpit. That's what we need to know from Go here. And Mike Flanagan's making sure we understand that.
And he's now justifying eating Joe Colley. He's like, yeah, well, God provided. Just saying. Like,
boy,
God provided me a snack when I needed one. That is audacious, sir. That is. So
he opens it with another one of those great little. He's a good preacher. Gospel means good news. Good news on Good Friday. There's a line though, almost immediately. He says, so Jesus was alone at the crucifixion. He was alone at the resurrection. And then he had a few allies and then a few more. And then suddenly God has an army. And Mildred Gunning is the first one right then to go.
The fuck, sir?
Say what now? Yeah, literally, exactly. What the fuck was that now? God has a what now?
Excuse me?
Who? Papa Flynn also isn't feeling it. He's the only other. Really, it's just the two of them and the whole congregation that look askance at what Father Paul is saying here. And I'm proud of it. But on the flip side, it occurred to me. It goes back to that question that we've talked about so many times on this. It's unexamined faith. So many people just hearing what someone tells them, and you're nodding along and you're feeling good in the crowd, right?
Well, and if anybody is going to be that person, you would expect it to be Mildred. Mildred, who's been having her daily, fucking communion, and knows that this is her former lover returned to her, like. You would think she'd be the one that could make an excuse for it, that could excuse it because it is whatever. It's a miracle. It's so beneficial to her. She's out of this darkness, and still she's the first one that's like, oh, we're not going back there,
So it occurred to me, though, I was thinking about the timeline. The last time that she got mass from him was after he had died and been resurrected, but before Joe shows up at his house. So literally, Father Paul gets back up, and they have the scene in the parsonage, and he says, "No, we're not canceling all my events," and he goes and serves mass to Mildred, and that's when they have the conversation when Mildred is awake enough and aware enough to recognize him, and they talk a little bit, and then he misses what would have been her morning mass. She was going to church and would have gotten mass that morning, but he's not there.
He's not doing
because he's dealing with Riley. Mm-hmm. So, I think she saw him after the turn, but before he had committed these atrocious acts and before he had begun to justify it for himself. And I think it is literally because she is so intimately familiar with the man. That's why she sees it so quickly.
She knows he's off. She knows there's something very wrong. This isn't the same man. And he's not. He's not. I mean, this is monstrous. You know what you are. When you're at the point that you're fucking drinking blood, like, I would know I'm a fucking vampire. I don't know. If I was like, oh, I just ate Joe Colley, I'd probably think to myself, unless I've taken a Hannibal Lecter type turn, that I'm probably a vampire. I don't know.
Okay, so Father Paul talks about a couple of things here, and I wanna get into the weird religion of it all.
Yes,
he talks about the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. Okay, so the Old Covenant is a formal agreement between God and the Israelites that was established on Mount Sinai. That's the idea, anyway. When somebody talks about the Old Covenant, they mean the Ten Commandments movie where Charlton Heston goes up to the top of the mountain and gets the tablets. Right. He and God made a deal up there. Part of that deal is circumcision, for instance, right? If you're going to be a man of God, you're supposed to be circumcised. That's your token as a human. That's you signing on the dotted line with God, who's made this agreement. If you follow these commandments, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to multiply the nation of Israel, and I'll make you a home, and blah, 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 blah.
But you got to cut the tip of your dick off.
That it was a conditional agreement, meaning that the Israelites were required to obey God and keep the law in exchange for God's protection and blessing. The Old Covenant included the Ten Commandments as well as 600 other laws. It also required that the Israelites make repeated animal sacrifices as a reminder of their sins. The Old Covenant is considered temporary and provisional in modern Christian theology, I should say. I don't know how modern Jews feel about this idea, so I don't want to speak for them. But in Christian theology, it's considered provisional. It was something that was put in place until Jesus could arrive, the actual manifestation of Christ happened, and that would replace it. This is contrasted with the New Covenant, which was made effective by the death of Jesus Christ. In the New Covenant, God is the unconditional source of salvation and blessing. So basically, until then, you had to make sacrifice all the time because the animal sacrifices weren't enough to stem back the eternal tide of sin and damnation. But Christ's sacrifice is enough. It's enough permanently. Mm-hmm. That's the idea. Okay. Hamish, though, from the pulpit here, is talking about God's will changing. God's will is the same until it changes. And it just occurred to me while I'm listening to him there how dangerous this entire idea of the new covenant is. Because again, like, if God just changed his mind 2,000 years ago and replaced animal sacrifices that he had required for 4,000 years or whatever we want to say, the history of the Jews had lasted at that point. So now we're not going to need to do that anymore. Oh, yes, you can eat shellfish. Oh, yes, you can be saved without, I started to say castration, not castration. What's the fucking word?
Circumcision.
Circumcision. There you go. That's a very different thing.
Woo! I don't think many people would be signing up for
great.
Christianity if castration was a part of the deal.
We thought foot washing was a deal breaker.
Was a little out there.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's what he's talking about there. Is that difference? The idea that Christians have taught for 2,000 years, basically, that God had one deal with humans, and not even all humans. God had one deal with Jews for a while, the Hebrews, and then at some point he said, "Hey, you know what? We ought to make a deal for everybody. It's a little bit better deal this time. Here's the deal." But what happens, what that causes, the very idea of a messianic religion leads to the ability for someone to manipulate that and claim themselves to be the new Messiah, right?
Yeah,
this is what David
100%.
Koresh did. This is what Jones did at Jonestown. This is the Kool-Aid drinkers, right?
Yeah.
This is where it comes from.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
He's got a church full of them here, Ashley.
Well, and what the hell is going on with this god that's like wheeling and dealing with people like the fucking casino owner? Like, what is that? Like, I'll take care of you if, like, that doesn't seem like, that doesn't even make sense to me.
No, it's... And
God isn't a bookie. God is not your bookie.
Yeah, we've already talked about this. God is not a bookie. He's not a day trader either. I don't know. I was telling Kelly last night about how this series, rewatching it this time and discussing it and breaking it down with you, has really shaken me up in a way. Even here's my thing. I think about the last 4 years. My wife and I and my family have been out of church. We've talked about this on the show. We left our local church because they were leaving the United Methodist denomination, trying to become more conservative, and specifically they were going to exclude officially in their documentation members of the LGBTQ community, and we weren't for it. We're not for it. So I think back on those last 4 years though, and I think none of my children would have had it easier emotionally, mentally, socially, if we had been active in that church. And then I think to myself, okay, even if we had an option for a true affirming congregation for us to be a part of in those 4 years, wouldn't that 4 years of exposure have made my children at least more susceptible to coercion and manipulation of these kinds? And I can't say no to that right now. I love church in some ways. Right. But it's a loaded gun, y'all.
There's a reason why abuse is prevalent in churches.
Yes.
I mean, there's a reason why. And it has so much to do with control, guilt, manipulation, and fear. And I'll just leave that on the table for everyone to think about.
Y'all chew on that for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, you are, I mean, and that's part of I will say, I do think that that's in some ways a beautiful part of it, because I do think you have to be a little bit vulnerable to live in a faith like that, know, to truly walk in your faith. I think that you do have to allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable in ways that I'm not willing to be. No.
Yeah. I'm just the thing that occurs to me this way, and it's not just this show, I should say, a quick recommendation here. I did like the entire Salems Lot oeuvre since the last time you and I talked.
Gobbling it up.
So I watched the 2024 adaptation. I watched that. We're going to talk about it on November 3rd here on this show. But we're also going to talk about some of these other things a little bit. I watched the 79 miniseries. I watched the 87 not a sequel. I watched the 2004 Rob Lowe miniseries re-adaptation. It's not bad. It's so good, honestly. I thought it was going to be my number one, honestly. Like, I like the 79 miniseries for nostalgia, but 2004 was a more accurate adaptation, I felt like. But then I watched the whole season of Chapelwaite, which is a prequel series set in the 1800s, and it's on MGM Plus, which is like Amazon Prime's premium streaming service. It's so strange. It's like $6.99 a month, but you can get a 1 week trial for free. So I signed up for the week trial. Y'all, I watched it in like 2 days, maybe 2.5 days. It was 10 episodes. So good. Adrian Brody's the main character, set in the 1800s. But like Salem's Lot, they have a local, a church and local congregation, which is already askance. The priest is maybe weird, and the congregation is not there for the right reasons, et cetera, et cetera. But also there's this like glimpses of a vampiric faith or a vampiric god, and you think you hear them say things and you're like, well, that's crazy. Who would ever believe that? And then you realize how closely it aligns with something and you're like, oh, wait a minute. This is an indictment of all religion, actually.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, drinking blood is like built into the whole thing.
Every time I think about it, I'm like, it's a blood religion, y'all. The whole world is under a blood religion. It's strange. It is strange. Anyway, I'm not a theologian. I'm not telling you not to go to church. I'm just telling you where I am. It's weird stuff going on here. Okay.
We're walking a path. That's what we're doing.
We said Mildred Gunning is the first one to notice. I've called Papa Flynn already, but here's what sets him off. The priest says, it is a war. There will be casualties. We must be soldiers. And Papa Flynn's like,
what, somebody gonna die about church? My God.
Then this is the most egregious to me. What is otherwise horrible is good because of where it is headed. Welcome to God's army. We're going to do great things. And he walks off the pulpit. And y'all, the fact that the whole church doesn't run out. The fact that the whole church isn't racing Mildred Gunning out of the room and pointing back and going, y'all don't ever go back again.
Yeah. 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 It's the foreboding of this whole episode. Like it's like, you know, something terrible is going to happen. Like it's like you're waiting for it. Okay. There's a movie called what is that? I can't remember what it was called, but it's about a couple that gets left behind on a dive trip. Open water.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They get fucking left behind on a dive trip, and you're just basically watching. I mean, I literally watched the timer tick on the DVD player, wanting the movie to end because you're just waiting on them to die. You know, like that's literally what you're doing. You're waiting for them to die, and that's what the whole movie is, just the anticipation of this horrible thing that's going to happen at the end. And that's how this episode feels to me. It's like, and maybe part because I know how the episode ends, so I know that shit is really going to hit the fan hard at the end of this episode, and like leading into the next one. But it is just, it's like this, you know, the music that plays when something creepy is about to happen. And it literally is playing because it's that weird kind of stuff going on.
The droning thing that they do.
Yes.
Newton Brothers are so great, man.
They're
the fact
so
that
brilliant.
they can sing these hymns and then also do that Hans Zimmer style. It's down.
So gross. And so, yeah, there's just such this episode leaves me feeling so icky on so many levels. Like, ugh.
Riley said he was going to come to Aaron's house, Ashley.
He did.
And he did. He did. How scared are you for Aaron? The first time you're watching this, how scared are you for Aaron once they get out on this boat?
I was a little concerned. I was like, well, he's got her out there in the middle of.
I was convinced.
Nothing.
Because, I mean, you think about it, we don't see this until later, but he's been given instructions to go spread the good news.
Right.
Authorization. You're going to get hungry. God's going to tell you who to give it to. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah. Because you're not. And the thing is, it's like, okay, God's going to tell you, but actually that's your blood craving. You want to eat.
The demon inside you.
Yeah, that's the fucking blood demon inside you wanting food. And,
oh, man.
And now he's equating that to God choosing who you're going to fucking turn to a vampire next.
So this, I feel like we, you know, in the Anne Rice world where we come from, you and I are both Anne Rice fans. Our main podcast, Articulate Coven's all about Anne's works. And in her world, the vampiric nature is a symbiotic relationship. Vampirism is a thing and it gets in you, but you as an individual remain as well. In some versions of this, it is very much that, like, you might remain for a while, but eventually the vampire conquers and it's the only will that's left.
Right.
In Salem's Lot, I think it is not exactly clear, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about when we talk about that 2024 adaptation, is the various ways that writers and directors have taken that idea and where they've gone with it. Here, I think it is clear, especially when we get later in the series, that the vampiric nature is not the only thing there. Your human will remains, and so I was nervous the first time I watched this. Watching it this time, I said to myself, there's no universe in which Riley was going to hurt her.
No,
her.
Not at all.
That he might have not been 100% sure when they got to the boat exactly what he was going to do or have her do. But I think she was never in danger.
I was talking with my brother about this particular episode of the show, and because this is one of his favorite television episodes of anything ever.
It's real good.
Yeah, it is really good.
It's real good.
But what he's saying, you know, that until Riley tells Aaron what's up, Aaron, like, this could potentially be like an apology. Like, he's he didn't show up when he's supposed to. Now he's going to take me out onto the lake, out into the water, the way that I made him do when we were kids. And this is kind of like, could this be kind of a cutesy romantic thing that's going to happen tonight? And she thinks she's about to have a totally different fucking experience than she has in that boat.
It's the worst date of all time.
It is the worst date, worst boat ride. 10 out of 10 would not ride again. Very bad. You think it sucks to get stuck on the Pirates of the Caribbean? Let me tell you that the smell of this boat is much worse.
Man, oh man, oh man. All right, let's start though. Because Riley, I mean, this is Riley's episode. It's one of those things that it does remind me. It was so common on Lost. You'd have a character who had been background for forever. You'd get an episode or two where they were featured in the A story, and then they'd get an episode that was all about them. You'd get a great backstory for them. They'd have a compelling thing on the island, lots of stuff happening, and then they'd die at the end, because that's the way that show worked, right? We need to feature them, and then we'd kill them. I mean, that's what we're getting here. We're getting a heavy Riley episode because they're saying goodbye to him. But I think he earns it. I think he does some great work here.
Yeah.
And I do think that I think this episode for him is better, honestly, than his discussion of what death is like in the last episode, which I thought was great. Yeah. But here, when he's talking about the origin of this all, campfires in the sky, we would huddle in the cave, at the edge of the cave, with our campfire and try to fend off the night and the predators that were coming for us as Neolithic man. And we'd look across the valley, and there are campfires everywhere out in the distance, so we could see, and we'd be like, oh, those are people just like us. Huh,
yeah, we're not alone
crazy. I wonder
there.
what they're doing tonight. And then we'd look up, and there were campfires in the sky. And what must those people be like to build a campfire way up there? It really is that simple. We all want purpose. We all want an origin story. We all want to know why it is.
Yeah.
I mean, Ashley, you and I joked last episode about being thrust into sentient life. But
right.
We do want to know why. Why do I have feelings?
Yeah.
The cow doesn't care if his neighbor is mean to him. Right? They don't worry about impressing each other or fitting in or
Anxiety
whatever.
is a human condition.
Yeah, and it's not great, honestly.
No. But I do think that we're wired for curiosity too. Like,
yes,
we're wired to ask questions. That's another reason why being in a religion where you're not allowed to ask questions, you're not supposed to question things, seems so like the antithesis.
Why would you do that?
Of human thought and human development. Why would you do that? Like, isn't it better to be able to answer the questions in some way, even if you don't have the real answer, even if the answer is we're not sure yet? That's okay. But you have to be able to ask questions.
I don't want to bang on just Christianity here, because the obvious thing is to talk about, well, yeah, that all comes from the Eden myth, right? And Eve was curious and ate the apple even though she'd been told not to. And so now we've got free will, but also we die.
But that bitch ate that apple.
Yeah, but it's not just Christianity though. Ashley, think about the Pandora's box myth. Pandora was curious and opened the box, without nobody told her not to specifically, so she did.
Yeah.
But it's and there too we blame a woman, right?
Right.
But it's curiosity.
That's a whole other can of worms.
But it's curiosity that is the inherent root of evil in a lot of mythology stories. I'm sure that's not true for every culture, by the way. Please put in the comments a great cultural myth story, origin story that doesn't involve.
We're a woman's rewarded for her curiosity.
Yeah. But it is weird to think about that. Everything basically about it's not just our myths, right? It's not just the stories of our gods, but so much of our culture, so much of the way that we organize our world is based on those stories we told ourselves about the campfires in the sky.
Right.
It's just crazy. It's crazy.
Well, and I do think it's something that, because technology has increased so exponentially over our lifetimes. I mean, I grew up, I learned to type on a typewriter. But then, you know, a year later, I had my first email address. So, you know, we kind of have that like crossover of less technology and less information at the tips of your fingers, to having everything at the tip of your finger whenever you want it, you know? And I think that that's something that we're pushing against now in a lot of ways. But then I also see fucking people thinking that like we are making the weather with weather machines. And then I'm like, no, Ashley, shut your mouth. Technology's done horrible things for people.
I mean, listen.
But I feel like it's more acceptable to be curious now. It's more acceptable to be seeking out information than it used to be. We don't say to our kids, we don't tell kids anymore, you're to be seen and not heard, you know? Like, children are allowed to participate in life. Sometime. Well, I mean, yeah. Right? But like, we're kind of like the last generation that was told shit like that, you know, and not like you don't question adults, you don't question authority, because we started to realize that fucking puts your kids in a dangerous position. And that you should be asking questions. You should be concerned about adults' behavior sometime, you know? I don't know.
Okay, we begin our story. First of all, I love they get out there on the boat, and then Aaron's like, okay, you got me out here. So like, where were you? What happened?
Yeah.
He goes, you're not going to believe it. But here we go. And so he starts to talk. I love, though, the idea, for us, it starts with him dead on the floor. Probably didn't start that way for her, right? Like, he probably started, I thought the priest was telling a lie, and so I went to see, and it turns out there's this winged dude. Anyway, I really would love to have seen how he started to tell
for
this.
For us, we're picking up where we left off.
Yeah, exactly.
As per my last email.
Yeah. Monsignor Pruitt, though, has a line here that really stuck out to me this time. He's telling the story about how he had a sister who passed away when they were young, and her death made him incredibly fearful of mortality, and that led him to the priesthood eventually. You know, that question of like why death happens and where it all goes and everything. Anyway, he says, God still has a plan, and death isn't part of it anymore. Not for all of us. We don't have to be afraid ever again. It occurred to me, and this goes back to what you were saying earlier about you feel less for him. You're less empathetic for Monsignor this time. There's more culpability for him is what I said. This is why. Monsignor has been acting out of fear. I mean, since his earliest days. Yeah. The way he handled the whole Mildred thing, that was fear. As in, like, why he and she didn't have a relationship. He should have left the priesthood and raised his daughter with the woman that he loved. He didn't because he was fearful of the consequences and the reactions. He didn't do anything about his dementia early because he was fearful of what was going on. He chose this moment. He brought the angel back because of fear. His journey to the priesthood starts with fear. Like, listen, I understand.
Which seems like a weird place to start a journey of faith.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's askew from the beginning. That's not... You're not supposed... We don't come to Jesus to save us. Well, I mean, that's literally what we do come to Jesus for, I suppose. Now that I say it out loud. Man. But I mean,
that's why the whole thing's fucked, Joel.
Yeah, right? Maybe this whole thing is a bad idea, actually.
Maybe it's all fear-based and terrible for everyone.
But the idea that you don't... Yeah, I mean, if you're scared into... I mean, Scared Straight is the thing from HBO where you get kids not to go to prison, right? Like, that's not the way you build your church. I don't think, anyway.
That's not even the way you keep kids out of prison anymore.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point.
Like, we don't even do that to kids anymore because it's fucked up and weird.
Oh, man. I'm just like... You're such a sad little man, actually. Oh, first of all, he is not little. It hasn't occurred to me in this whole show. You mentioned last week when he hugs Joe Collie, how like overwhelming that feels, even though Joe's a pretty big guy too.
Yeah.
This episode, there's a few moments where he's standing next to Riley, and you realize Hamish Linklater's a pretty tall motherfucker. I think. Yeah,
there's actually. Like a physical presence to him.
Dude, he's like a foot and a half bigger than Riley is, and Riley's not like a small guy. It doesn't seem like.
He feels dangerous. In this episode, like this scene with it's just him and Riley in that room having one last AA meeting, and he feels threatening to me. He feels very dangerous.
Yes, Yeah, it's exactly how he felt this time. And I think the size is part of it. And I don't know if they did something with the camera angles to make that more obvious or egregious this time than they have previously. I don't know. But it just so stuck out to me this time. He's a big figure, actually, in this room. And he has power. I mean, he literally holds Riley down, right? But,
right.
Riley starts...
Well, and when he's wearing his robes, he's like, those robes are so voluminous. He has that physical presence at the altar as well. You know, when he's at the pulpit, you know,
I mean, Ashley, think about it. The Pope wears a big tall hat, right? I mean, the current Pope doesn't, because he doesn't like the ornamentation. He also doesn't wear gold shoes, but most of them have. They wear big tall hats. Why? Because it's presents. It's like peacocks. We got to fluff up the feathers and showcase for the other baboons or whatever.
That's right.
Okay. Riley says, "We're having a meeting?" And he goes, "We're having the meeting."
The meeting. Yeah. Okay. This is their big come to Jesus, where he's like, now you're a vampire, and
and I think it's so important to the whole series, actually, because of where it starts. Monsignor tells Riley the story of a little altar boy who didn't have faith, and how he got tricked into believing. I mean, and it turns out this is Monsignor that did it, right?
Right.
But Monsignor tricked Riley into belief. Like, what a fucking... Why would you ever tell this guy? First of all, why... He thinks it's a heartwarming story.
Right.
And I'm like, this dude was right. This dude was teetering on the edge of what the fuck is going on to begin with. You're a villain now. You're his origin story. As like... And Monsignor says, faith enough for almost a decade. He's so proud of himself.
Yikes. Yikes on bikes.
It cut me so badly. I do love, though, the moment when Riley says, "Who are you? How do you know that story? Who are you?" And he goes, "You know who I am."
You know who I am. Yeah.
They all knew who he was. They knew who he was when he showed up, Ashley. Yeah, the whole fucking island did. Bill's mother, Bowles' mother, earlier when she's talking to the sheriff, he says something about, "I'm going to talk to my contacts on the mainland." She goes, "That mainland's fine, but islanders, you need to ask the islanders. Islanders always know." Mm-hmm. These people knew that was Monsignor Pruitt, and they all lied to themselves because we want to look the other way rather than cause a issue, rather than be looked at as strange or...
Well, and what if it's a test of my faith?
Yeah, that's...
What if it's a test of my faith? What if the Lord is testing my faith?
Ashley, are you familiar with the story of Doubting Thomas?
Oh, just in passing.
Okay, so that's what's referenced here. Monsignor specifically references the story of Thomas. Thomas was one of the apostles. There's a famous painting by Caravaggio called The Incredulity of St. Thomas from 1602. It's really, really cool. But the story of Thomas, he's one of the apostles. The apostles are not present for the crucifixion, right? Because honestly, they were worried about getting killed too, so they all skedaddled. When it's clear that the Romans are going to try Jesus and kill him, they all leave. At the actual crucifixion, the only people who are there, traditionally speaking, Mary, Mother of God, and Mary Magdalene. The two of them are present with Jesus as he dies. Mary Magdalene is the one, traditionally again, that first sees Jesus after resurrection. Easter Sunday morning, she goes to the tomb to leave some flowers or an anointing or something, and the tomb is open and empty. And she's like, what in the heck is going on? She turns to go back to find the apostles, and there's a man in the garden who she doesn't even recognize at first. It's Jesus. They have a conversation, and then she goes back to tell the apostles he's risen. The apostles see him quite a bit later, but even once they see him, and everybody else is all into it, and they're like, oh my gosh, Lord, you've risen. Thomas still says, I don't know about all that.
Oh, seems a little
he
sus
literally,
to me.
The Bible says that Jesus took his hands and put them in the wounds in his side where he had been stabbed with the spear, put his wounds in the hands of in his hands or actually it would have been his wrists, not his hands. I don't know if you know anything about crucifixion. You can't hang from your hands.
No, indeed you cannot.
But he puts the wounds in his arms, he puts the wounds in his side, and so only by actually physically seeing the blood and touching these wounds, that's when Thomas goes, oh my gosh, it's really you. Thomas goes on to become a saint. Eventually, he's like a founder of the early church, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea is that he had to be shown. He had to be given proof. And so that's what he's referencing here with Riley, is that Riley's a doubting Thomas.
Right.
But the idea is, on Monsignor's side, now that I've shown you, aren't you going to be that much stronger a convert? Aren't you going to go running from the, to the hills and spreading my praises, et cetera, et cetera? It's all weird, man. It's weird. Okay, one more thing here before we leave this scene with Riley and Monsignor alone. Monsignor is explaining to him how, yes, I ate Jokali and I didn't feel bad about it.
And I don't feel guilt.
And yes, I even drank from you and I still don't feel guilt. How does it make you feel?
How do you feel about that dead girl that you killed?
How does it make you feel that I don't feel any guilt? And he finally forces it out of Riley. Riley says, jealous. I feel jealous.
Yeah.
But here's the difference. Monsignor feels like that is attractive now. Oh, he's jealous of my lack of care, and so he's going to come over to my side and get it too. Riley understands. Yeah, I wish I could let go of this pain. I earned this pain, though. This pain is real. It's for a reason.
Right.
It's righteous, honestly, this pain that I feel.
Yeah.
Because I ended someone's life. And it's a widening chasm there that Monsignor doesn't understand is there.
No. He doesn't get it. He's using that. I mean, he's using the guilt as a manipulation. As if to say, and Riley knows nothing about the way he feels about that girl. Killing that girl has changed. In the time that he's turned into a vampire, he still feels the way he feels about that girl dying in this moment talking to Monsignor. So it's not like this transformation has changed intrinsically how he feels about that, because it wasn't done under this guise of like, God's going to guide you to people to kill and you're not going to have to feel bad about it. So it's also strange.
So Bev comes in. I love this whole scene between Bev and Riley, by the way, because like Monsignor's been trying to make the argument in one way, and then Bev comes in and is like, "Here, bitch, take some gospel. You better believe this."
She's the worst. Bev Keane, just like in a situation where we know Monsignor Pruitt is a vampire eating folks. Bev Keane is still the biggest bitch in town.
It is crazy that she's in the room with an actual monster and she's the bigger monster. Yeah. All right, so I had to look him up because I was like, surely this is like that scene in Pulp Fiction where Sam Jackson's quoting the Bible and it's not really quoting the Bible.
Uh-huh.
No, she's quoting the Bible here. John 6:54. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. 6:55. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. 6:56. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me, and I in him. And as Bev says, that's pretty specific, isn't it?
It's weird that you could probably find something in the Bible to justify any sort of behavior you want to engage in.
I mean, there are lots of passages about slaves obeying their masters and et cetera, and tons of verses about... I will say this, specifically the one that's used and is a bugaboo of mine is verses using the phrase or term homosexual when that term didn't exist until the 1940s.
Yeah.
And it was specifically inserted in the 1940s by one translator for the purposes of dividing American population over this specific question. Like, you go look it up if you want to, but it's a whole thing. There are verses in the Bible that refer to sexual practices, but almost all of them are about coercion or power imbalances, i.e., as a slave owner, you're not supposed to screw your slaves, for instance, and that's laid out in the Bible. That was one of the things that they chided about the Roman population in particular, was that there was this sexual imbalance for different kinds of, or citizens and non-citizens, right? And also the idea of pederasty, which is like raising young boys and fucking them into adulthood. Also something that is specifically called out in the Bible. But that's different than chiding all same-sex relationships or saying that same-sex attraction is inherently evil. That ain't in the Bible, y'all. There is some weird shit in the Bible, but that ain't in there.
There's some weird shit in there.
Okay, Bev says, you sit there, blessed amongst men, smirking when I say God's will. she's so fucking jealous of Riley. Why hasn't she asked for the blood yet, by the way?
Yeah. I think, I have no idea. Well, I think she probably feels like it has to be offered.
Maybe. I mean, I suppose she could be, without the blood currently, she gets to go out in the day and run things when Monsignor can't.
She'll have to be chosen. It'll have to be the right time for her to be chosen, you know.
Yeah.
It'll mean
Monsignor
more.
Pruitt is saying goodbye to Riley, and he says, in their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. Okay, I'd heard that a million times growing up, and it was one of those things that always bugged me because my father literally went to a church called Free Will Baptist Church.
Yeah, I was like, are we supposed to have free will? What the fuck?
I question him on this all the time. I was like, I don't understand how those two things are congruous. You can't say that in their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. But also I have free will. Free will so much so that I could ruin the whole world and send myself straight to hell and disappoint God for all eternity, et cetera, et cetera. But also he guides our steps. Anyway. Yeah. Theology's complicated.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so the song that comes in here as Riley is taking his first look around the island with his new eyes.
Oh,
it's the Newton Brothers.
Well, and this is the effects are so cool. Like the way everything looks.
I love the blood effect.
Yeah.
The thrumming up through the neck, I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. The way the sky looks is really cool.
The song is called Sons and Daughters. Oh, sons and daughters, let us sing with heavenly host to Christ our King. Today the grave has lost its sting. Alleluia, alleluia. At night the apostles met in fear. Among them came their Lord most dear, and said, my peace be with you here. Alleluia, alleluia. When Thomas first the tidings heard, how they had seen the risen Lord, he doubted the disciples' word. Alleluia, alleluia. My pierced side, O Thomas, see, and look upon my hands, my feet. Not faithless, but believing be. Alleluia, alleluia. No longer Thomas then denied. He saw the feet, the hands, the side. You are my Lord and God, he cried. Alleluia, alleluia. Literally, it's a Doubting Thomas song, y'all.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool, honestly, the way that they choose these hymns. Again, music is a fantastic part of this show.
Oh, man, it really is.
It has struck me now, and I think there's basically one hymn in the last couple of episodes too, and so that's really all we're getting now. Yeah. We're not getting the drops,
which is interesting because the music, even though we're seeing our characters supposedly like their lives improving, their health improving, everything, there's not any of the joy of that first episode of like, we get to see everybody in town, the boys are riding their bikes and everyone's listening to music and having a chill ass time, you know, like everything is just tense and intense moving forward through the rest of these we've got 2 episodes left.
Yeah, just 2 more after this.
And there's no fun to be had any longer, kids.
The fun is over, y'all. I'm sorry. We're gonna have fun in these discussions, but there ain't no fun. But
there ain't no fun for them.
Crockett. Okay, Noah is unavailable commented on our YouTube video. I think this was on the discussion of episode 3, but they said, I'm always getting fantastic song recommendations from your podcast. If I could recommend another one in a similar vein of worshiping a lover like a god. So we were talking about Holly Holy, and I talked about the Justin Bieber song too. She said, I gotta mention Take Me to Church by Hosier. It feels like a hymn to me. Yeah, I think you
talked about that one. Yeah.
She said, I've seen videos of his concerts, and if there weren't so many queer people, it would look like a youth church concert. Hosier totally looks like a church youth leader.
That is
worship
hilarious.
Minister. Again, with the Jesus is My Boyfriend song. It's very popular right now.
Yes, very, very in the vein of...
Okay, so when Riley is... let's see, Riley's finishing his story to Erin, and he's basically giving her her mission now. Nearer My God to Thee comes back in. We'd mentioned that previously on the show. Yeah. It's a nice theme that comes a lot in the show, but it comes back here. Okay. How do you interpret the scene after dawn rises? So Riley's saying goodbye. He closes his eyes. Dawn finally happens. He opens his eyes, and he's in the boat, not with Erin anymore. He's in the boat with the young woman that he killed.
Yeah.
And she's not injured, and she's not bloody, and she's not sad. She's smiling and beautiful and glowing like an angel. And she reaches out her hand, and Riley takes it. And that's the end of that scene. And then we flip back to what Aaron is experiencing in the boat. But Riley's portion, how do you interpret that?
I mean, it could be heaven. It could be exactly what Riley said he thinks happens when you die. You know,
the DMT missiles.
You know, I mean, it's his end. It's his quiet transition. And I'm glad that, knowing what Aaron is experiencing, I'm glad he's experiencing this instead.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, because he has a very peaceful transition.
It's heaven. It's heaven to me. I don't. Yeah. I think Riley's wrong. I think there is something after, and I do think it is a oneness. I think it is an acceptance, and an understanding, and a connection. In a way, we talked previously about... A release,
too. Like a release.
Yes. Yeah, he's not burdened there, right? He's not burdened about that woman's death or the terrible things he did to his family.
Look at her. She's fine.
Yep.
It's
all fine. It's all
healed.
Fine in a cosmic sense.
She's made whole again. And so is he.
Yeah. And I can't help but believe that. I think honestly that ending is the reason why we as human beings often have that hole in our heart that we've talked about before, where you can't be happy with somebody else if you can't be happy with yourself. But I think that longing is about the connection that we're supposed to have, which is not with just one person or a group of people, but with everything, with all of it. Yeah. And so that's what we're getting a glimpse of here, I think, for Riley. And I think it's beautiful. I think it is one of the most lovely images of heaven that we've ever gotten on film. Honestly.
It's quite lovely.
I love it.
And then we transition into the actual horror of the thing.
I mean, and he's melting alive right there in front of her, and she is screaming her head off.
Yeah, and he says to her, "I came out here so I would have nowhere to go."
And I'm sorry you have to see this.
I'm so sorry you have to see this. But he knows it's the only way she'll 100% believe him. Like, this will prove... I think
he's right, by the way.
This will prove everything I said. This will prove it to her. This is I'm giving you evidence of things not thought to ever be seen in life. And here you go, and she has to be witness to his horrible death. And how horrifying it is for her. Like, again, that juxtaposition of this real peaceful transition that he's having, and then she's just screaming, sobbing. It goes past the point of his end and into the blackout, into the credits, the screaming. And it was the most... I remember seeing this for the first time and how affecting it was. And it still gets me like that almost every time. Like, goosebumps, gutted feeling, nauseated, just the horror of it all. Watching someone she loves just burn in front of her eyes. And also there's just the horror of, like, oh my God, everything he fucking said is real. Everything he said is real. I was drinking that blood. That's where my baby went.
I mean, that's the thing that occurred to me this time, is the screaming is not just for Riley's death or for what she's watching.
Everything.
It's for the realization. Yeah, exactly. Man, we had a good comment back on episode 2, on book 2's discussion. Paradox Child 01 put on our YouTube channel. I know this is spoilers, but this just came to me. So I screenshotted this and I
like, we'll
made a note for Midnight Mass book 5. Yeah. She says, Riley feels himself to be a monster for killing the girl. He's committed the sin of murder, probably wants to die every day, but only after becoming a true monster. His rebirth and suicide gives him the purpose that he always wanted. He saves the island, not in a traditional hero fashion.
No.
And he doesn't really save the island probably in the end. We'll see how that turns out in the next couple of episodes. But he saves Aaron. Yeah. And he protects her from what could have been turning accidentally against her knowledge or against her will, whatever, by his loss here, by his sacrifice. Also, he protects himself from having killed anybody else.
Yeah.
He doesn't eat from anybody.
Well, and he doesn't...
he drinks from Sturge when he's forced to take it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't drink again. He just dies.
Yeah. Yeah. He's not interested in pursuing this life. I mean, we had a conversation about just in passing in our about Interview with a Vampire, talking about, would you want to be a vampire? Like, if you could be turned. I do not want to be a vampire on Crockett Island.
Oh, for sure. No.
This is not the kind of vampire Ashley would like to be. I don't mind running around with Lestat, but I don't want to fucking be a vampire on Crockett Island. Fuck that noise.
So, I mean, realistic, and you and I have joked about it in the past, but, like, I don't even want to be a vampire in the Anne Rice world because I don't want to watch my children grow old and die.
Yeah.
I don't want to watch every person I've ever known and everything I know about society wither away. You know? I don't believe that I could cling on to the passage of time in the same way that somebody like Marius does in her novels, for instance. I don't think I could. And now I will say, it would be easier for you to talk me into it in a world where ancient vampires look like beautiful statues versus in a world where ancient vampires look like that shit.
That fucking guy. Yeah. Yeah, I
don't want no Nosferatu vampires, thank you.
No, they're not nice. They do not look good. I think they smell bad too. Like I can smell them, I don't like it.
They gotta stink. Don't they smell like
dank,
death?
Like a basement, like musty
bad
ass
nursing homes.
Oh god, musty ass vampires. Get them away from me.
Okay. We're high-minded there. Now we've made some jokes, so I can go to this very low vibration comment.
Excellent.
I don't even know who gave this. My apologies, because it was way back in the beginning, and I tried to find it a couple of times. I can't even find. I think maybe it was in the Facebook group. Someone though said, basically, as soon as we started talking about this show at all, they were like, what about that boat ride? And like, how was he sure that she wasn't just going to sink in the middle of the bay? Like, was he not worried that he'd burn the boat up and they would sink?
That's a really valid point. He doesn't know what's going to fucking happen. He doesn't know. He just knows that light burns
I'm assuming
him.
It's an aluminum boat, right? Not a wooden boat, but I don't know.
God. It's a bold choice. It's a very bold choice. Yeah.
She had to row all the way back to that island too by herself, man.
She has to. Well, because I had to watch the beginning of the next episode I just let it run for a second. She's like has to wipe the seat off.
Oh yeah, shit, because it's covered in ash. Oh man, and don't do that to me. Like, let's come up. Let's do something else. I don't know, man. We could just do it in the park, right?
A lot of different places. Yeah, thank you. We don't have to be out in the middle of the fucking ocean in a little nightmare boat.
The sun's everywhere.
The sun's out.
They could have gone to the uppers. It just occurred to me they could have gone to the uppers. That's what she would have at least been on land then.
Yeah, no, and then she has to row her ass back after all that.
Not cool, Riley. That wasn't great.
Not cool, Riley. That was a bad date. That was a bad third date, and you're not gonna
worst date.
Not even gonna get a hand job at the end of it.
I'm telling you, that's the big shame for me is that we didn't get a sex scene. Riley and Kate Siegel are both beautiful people. I would have liked a little loving and kissing. That's just my own thing there.
No. Instead you got a fiery death in a boat.
Fiery death in a boat.
Hope that helps.
Put that on the placard.
Yes.
Man, if they put that on the church sign, I bet more people would show up.
I mean...
Y'all, this town is going to hell in a handbasket. I don't know what to tell you. It's gonna get ugly this next couple of episodes. Book 6 is ahead of us. We'll be back in a week to talk about it. Don't forget, you can get all of our videos early and ad-free on our Patreon feed. Speaking of, I am making sure now with all the new episodes to put the audio version on Patreon as well. I know some of you really like to listen, so those are available at the same time. And I'm slowly going back and putting the old episodes up as well. So eventually, I'll let you know when you're done. But you can subscribe as a Patreon with the RSS feed from there, and then you'll get all of our episodes in all your podcast apps.
Y'all could go back like 7 years of us nonsensing around.
Dude, it's so weird when I'm going in the calendar to schedule those posts for the audio posts for the old ones. It's like just hold the back button on the calendar and wait and wait and wait and wait.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild how long we've been.
How old were my children when we started this? It was a long time. They were young. It was a long time ago.
They were wee.
Yeah. All right, folks. As this episode goes up, the patrons can be expecting in a day or two the first episode of Kelly and I discussing Wolf Like Me from Peacock.
I'm so excited.
Very cool. I'm excited about that too. Very cool werewolf show. Isla Fisher and Josh Gad are the two leads for that. Really cool production. Kelly and I started that this weekend, so that's going up. And then not too far away, again, for our patrons, and then a little bit later for the YouTube feed, you and Brettly are going to be talking about Fall of House of Usher.
We sure are. We've started our watch, and we've armed ourselves with our research, because I realized that I actually have to do more work now because Joel does all the heavy lifting for us over here at the Articulate Coven. But if I'm going to play with Brett, I'm going to have to be more like Joel.
Thank you. I'm
or make
so
Brett be
excited.
Like Joel. I don't know. We'll see. But
maybe that's the answer. You just make him do all the homework. I am super excited to hear you guys break that down. I still haven't seen the series. I'm
so
actually about
good.
to watch. I was waiting. I finished Chapelwaite, and now I'm about to start my Fall of the House of Usher watch. So
well, I'm in full all horror all the time mode, because we are in October, and y'all, I have been watching. I watched Terrifier 2. I went back and watched Terrifier, and then we at first we watched the little anthology that had like 2 shorts with him in it. I was like, this is a lot of fucking creepy clown for me. Like, I'm gonna need a clown break. Just like
those are pretty gory.
I'm gonna put Scream on. They're fucking gross is what they are. They are so gory. I haven't watched anything that gross in a real long time.
So let me tell you, I really, really, really want to watch The Substance, the new Demi Moore movie.
Oh, yeah, that's on my list.
But it's body horror.
Yeah, that's hard for me. That's hard.
And I can't. Yeah, I really gore generally I can't do. Body horror specifically is it's a fine line for me before it's too much. And I'm certain the Terrifier is too much for me.
You need to stay away from that because it's very body horror-y, and also but there's something about it that's so absurd. Like,
sure,
they take it to such an absurd place that I can really kind of dissociate a little bit and pull myself out of it, and it's not as bad. But there were plenty of times that I was like, no. But yeah, so we're in full on scary movie mode over in House Eiler. We're just watching all the creepy shit that we can get our hands on. It's been so much fun. I love this time of year.
When Sturge pulls the knife out and cuts his arm, I sort of wince and turn away. So that's my level of gore, folks.
See, I can handle some pretty nasty shit. I don't really like the torture porn stuff, but
yeah.
I'll get in there and get gross.
I will say, and I'm sure Terrifier has this too, and this is what Kelly and I were talking about with Wolf Like Me. I think horror is best when it's about trauma. Like, when we use the monsters to be metaphors for our own internal demons. And
that's why we love Flanagan.
Yes,
House of Hill House. Haunting of Hill House is Haunting of Hill House is amazing, but it's because of those characters. It's because of those characters and their journey and what's happened to them and how they deal with it in their current existence. It's much less about the ghosts and the house and everything, and much more about the people and their life experiences. So
I'm proselytizing about Midnight Mass currently on Threads. Anytime I see somebody posting about Midnight Mass, I'm in the comment section going, hey, we have a little podcast where we talk about it. Actually, you should watch this. But somebody posted the other day, I watched the first episode of Midnight Mass, and the Catholic scenes just hit me so hard. Is it all about this? I don't know if I can handle it. I've got so much religious trauma, blah, blah, blah.
Ugh.
And several people in the comments had said some version of, yes, it is there. It's absolutely there. But there is a catharsis, and the series is going somewhere. I think you're going to enjoy it overall. I agree. And we're so close to that catharsis.
We
folks.
are.
We are coming upon the conclusion. Thank you guys for making all this possible. Thank you for watching and enjoying with us. We will be back soon to talk about Book 7, The Acts of the Apostles, which I think is a great one. Again, I don't know why he chose 7 specifically, but all of his names are excellent.
Yeah, I mean, they are. They're all very, very good. We're ready for what's next.
Until we talk to you again, go and watch Book 7 of A Midnight Mass on Netflix, and then come back and hear us discuss it. Leave comments in the comment section, and we'll use those as well. Thank you all so much. We've been your hosts. I'm Joel.
I'm Ashley.
And we are the Articulate Coven. Thank you for watching Flanagan, a Mike Flanagan rewatch from the Articulate Coven. If you want our videos and audio early and ad-free, visit articulatecoven.com/join and join the Coven.